The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF.
Hi, I'm Amber Bell, and this is Real Agriculture. I am here today with Meagen Reed, who is one of the agronomy managers with Saskatchewan Pulse Growers. And we're going to talk about aphanomyces and root rot, which is one of her specialties. So thanks for joining us today, Meagen.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's very, very wet. My car actually almost got stuck on the road.
Yeah.
So it's a great time to be talking about aphanomyces, I think.
It is, yeah. So we're in a pea field right now, and if you can see throughout the video here in the background behind us, there's quite a bit of standing water. The road has standing water, and our soil is saturated, to say the least. We're definitely mud.
And that's the perfect condition to start these root rots growing, right?
Yeah, so root rot, you're talking specifically about aphanomyces, but we typically refer to root rot as a complex because there's more than just one pathogen. So we've got aphanomyces, that's the real big ugly one that we talk about the most. Then we also have a number of different fusarium species, Rhizoctonia, Pythium, and all of those different pathogens will set in conjunction with one another at different times throughout the growing season, or in the spring particularly. But we tend to call them a complex because one will set in and it just opens the door for the others to move in afterwards. And that's one of the things we see particularly with aphanomyces and fusarium, is that we don't really know which one comes first. They typically are always present together.
Okay, so chicken or the egg scenario.
Yeah,
here.
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So gearing into aphanomyces a little bit more, what environmental conditions does it like? Like, obviously we're out in a very wet field and it's a good condition for it, but what else does it like?
Yeah, so aphanomyces specifically, when we talk about that pathogen, looking at the disease triangle. So when you have the disease triangle, you need to have all three of those factors satisfied. So you need a pathogen, a host, and the right environment. And so if we take this field, for example, we have purely saturated soil. We have a host crop, which is a pea or lentil. They're equal for susceptibility. And then I haven't confirmed in this field whether there's aphanomyces here, but we could go out on a limb and say possibly, probably. Conditions specifically, though, when we talk about the environment, saturated soil, we tend to find it's worse where there's heavy clay and compaction. Fields that don't drain well, so water pooling and sitting like we're seeing here. Also, a really tight rotation. So the more inoculum you have built up in the soil with aphanomyces, it compounds. It's like compounding interest. Every time you grow that host crop, you're going to add to that inoculum level. Aphanomyces particularly we see it really rearing its head and seeing symptoms when soils hit about 22 to 27 degrees Celsius, and it really loves pH between 4.5 and 6.5. So most of our soils in the province are neutral, but our topsoils are tending now to be a little bit slightly acidic, just below neutral, and that's due to a number of factors, fertilizer stratification, but just slightly acidic. Honestly, if we have heavy clay, saturated soils, tight rotations, it's the perfect environment for aphanomyces to thrive.
Start seeing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does that compare to other root rots? Are they similar in what environmental conditions they like?
Yeah, there's lots of similarities. The biggest one we typically see is moisture. Lots of the diseases in the root rot complex will activate or release spores when moisture levels hit a certain point. Pythium, for example, is an oomycete, so the same type of pathogen as the category that aphanomyces falls into, so it's not a true fungi. It's what we call an oomycete or a water mold. So Pythium, we typically see that really early in the growing season. Seed that goes down untreated, they can just rot away in the seed beds because it's cold and it's wet. So those are the conditions that Pythium really enjoys. Fusarium, there's a number of different species that we have. So Avanasium, Redolens, Oxysporum, Solani. And depending on the species or the strain, there's slightly differing conditions that it prefers. But again, cool, wet soils, some prefer warm, wet soils, but wet is still the common denominator. And then another one, the other pathogen that we see in the complex is Rhizoctonia. So typically, lots of guys are really familiar with Rhizoctonia as wire stem in canola. So Rhizoctonia likes warm and wet, followed by dry. So we typically see in canola, for example, that stem pinching and just the roots turning to a thread, or the stem turning to a thread. One conditions start to dry up a little bit later. So you typically see it a little bit later in the spring as well. And kind of at the same time as we're seeing aphanomyces symptoms really show up visibly in the field without having to dig up any plants. So when you look at the range of conditions, it's really
Wet.
Yeah, wet, but right from the onset of seeding to when you're starting to make decisions about fungicide timing. All of those conditions that we experience in the spring at any given point could be conducive to any one of those pathogens activating and setting in.
Okay, so the pathogens are in the soil already.
Yeah, some are seed-borne, soil-borne. Most of them have residue-borne as well, so they'll hang up on the residue. Fusarium, Rhizoctonia. Aphanomyces is not seed-borne. It's soil-borne, and it moves with the way the water flows, which is, when you look across the field, you can see some lighter, it's a little bit hard today, but lighter green areas or yellowing off areas, and then other parts of the field that are a nice rich dark green. Water molds will swim with the soil water once it reaches saturation level, and so it will move with however the water flows throughout a field.
Okay, and this is at a fairly early stage of the crop right now. So what do you see as the crop goes through its stages?
As the infection progresses? Yeah, so standing here today, Emily and I were here, my summer student, a couple days ago, and we're just starting to see some lesions on the hypocotyl or on the stem, just starting to see some browning off of some root systems. As that progresses, with aphanomyces in particular, you'll see no nodulation. Nodules won't form or set in. This is about the time that we should start seeing nodules starting to fix nitrogen. Visibly, you'll see these lighter areas get yellower. They'll be stunted. They'll start to become chlorotic and die off. And if we dug those plants up, you would see that those classic honey brown roots, no nodules. And if there's fusarium there, which I'm going to bet money there is, you'll see blackening of the stem or the hypocotyl, which is really classic for fusarium. And if you split that stem open, it'll often have a red or purple cortex. So the center of the stem, where the nutrients flow, will start to turn red or purple. And that's really diagnostic of a fusarium infection. And often we'll see them together. So you'll get honey brown roots and a black stem. And you can go on a limb and say, you know what, we probably have both here.
Right, right. Okay, so a farmer comes out into their field and notices that this is happening. What are their next steps? Is there something they can do about it? And is it going to differ in wet versus dry years?
Yeah, so for this grower, for example, in 10 days or so, these symptoms are really starting to show up. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do in season. It is what it is. But if you wanted to confirm what was actually here, and particularly important for aphanomyces, because that inoculum, it compounds, it builds every time there's a host and the conditions are right. Fusarium, Rhizoctonia, those diseases will infect the other crops in our rotation. So we're never getting away from them, and it's kind of a non-starter. There are other management practices or tools that are available for guys to manage those diseases, but with aphanomyces, it's really challenging. So what I would recommend is that a grower come out, take a plant sample, if it's in season, and send those roots and get the roots. That's important, not just the above ground parts, because the disease is in the roots, and send it away to one of the commercial labs we have available to do a DNA extraction and to just identify and confirm, yes, you have aphanomyces, yes, you have fusarium, this is the species. And from there, it becomes a planning tool for the following year or for years out. So once you know that you have confirmed aphanomyces in a field, it becomes a rotation management strategy for the next number of years.